Hello and Happy New Year. We thank you for joining us for another tutorial, a continuation of web development. In this tutorial, we're going to learn about HTML. What is HTML? HTML is short for Hypertext Markup Language and is a standard for web pages. To better understand HTML, let's say you wanted to write a letter, and we're going to show you this example on Windows Notepad. In Notepad, you can only modify the font and the size of the text. This is true for most simple note editors. You can't do anything else like underlining a word or making it bold or adding images, creating tables and such. So now that we've updated the font and the size, let's go ahead and save this. And once we save the file and then we open a different text file, the same text and size of the fonts will apply. These changes are not saved in the file but are referenced to the application, in this case Notepad. Now if you use WordPad, then you can apply formatting and making it bold or italic. These changes are stored in the file. If you open the WordPad file in Microsoft Word or another online word reader, you'll always see the formatting changes. So we must have saved the formatting instruction in the file. There must also be a standard so that any application capable of opening a WordPad file needs to understand in order to render it with the formatting. Let's peek into WordPad file and see how the changes are saved. As you can see, we have the font and other attributes to identify our formatting. So now that we have the RTF opened up and a text editor, as you can see, we started off with the header. And the header basically contains the information as far as what type of font was used, and some description of what generator was used. In this case, this is generator rich 2.0, which is identifying the WordPad. And then after that, we have some information that describes the font and the bold of the word, \B starting in \B0, and then italic, \I, \I0, is the terminator. And then we have line 5, which is the terminator for the RTF file itself. So the RTF file is a source file containing the markup. The WordPad application is our viewer to display our markup RTF source file. HTML is the same thing. We can have an HTML file that has the source and a browser as the viewer. Now let's take a look at a very simple HTML markup for HTML page. So here in our Visual Studio Code, we have a blank document. Let's go ahead and change this to HTML so we can get some help. The first thing you want to do is you want to identify what a document is, and in this case it'll be HTML. So we create a tag called HTML, and the tag usually has a opening and a closing tag. So we open it with some open bracket and close bracket, and inside of it we have the word HTML. And then to identify the closing tag, we just have a backslash or forward slash and then the word HTML. Everything inside of this is now going to be the HTML. The other thing we can do is we can have the body. And in the body, again, we'll have a body tag in there to close it off. And in the body is where we put all of our HTML. Now there's additional information here that you can put, for example, the head or the header. But in our case, let's just go ahead and stick with the body. When we get to when we actually start getting to write about JavaScript and styling the HTML, we'll go ahead and learn about that. And we're going to keep this very, very simple. So if we actually save this now, and we'll go ahead and save it as HTML. And then if we were to open this, let's say in our browser, you'll notice that there's nothing in there because this doesn't have any kind of a text or anything like that. So here in our browser, we are using our file protocol and opening up our test HTML. And as you can see, there is nothing in here. To add some text here, we can actually just write this, and if we go to our browser and we open it, now we see some text in here. But this is probably not quite correct, because in order to identify this, we need to actually start it with a tag identifying a paragraph, and then we can add our text in here. So now if we go ahead and refresh, and if we actually view the page source, you'll notice that we have our HTML, our body, and then we have our add some text and a paragraph. The paragraph tag actually makes it simple to be able to separate our text. Now if you want to have a new sentence, and if you were to just enter some more text and then refresh this, you'll notice that this space doesn't come over here. So you'll have to separate this out by using a paragraph tag. And then now if we refresh, you'll notice that we have a line between the two, but the line is also pretty greater. So let's actually stop here because we just wanted to show you some really simple HTML and how this would work, and then go over all of the different elements that you can use within HTML. There's paragraph, how you want to make this bold, change the fonts, adding tables, images, and all those different things, and we'll look at those one at a time. So there are two resources you can go to actually get more information about the HTML. If we go to w3school.com and search for basically HTML elements, you'll get to see all of the tags and a quick description of what they are. We're not going to use all of these, but we'll use the most important ones that you see in day to day. And then if you also go to the developer.mozilla.org, you'll see the same information here and a little bit more descriptive information. And then they also have some links. So if you go to the specific link, it shows you a little bit more detail of what that is and additional information. So far what we've seen is a quick view of the HTML, and then having an HTML tag to identify our document as HTML, and then having a body tag where our information is going to go, and then we've seen the paragraph tag where we can add some text in here. But if you look at the HTML, notice that there's a big space between this text and this text, because we use the paragraph and therefore it adding a new line in there for us. But what if you didn't want to have this line? Well, if you didn't want to have this line, then in that case what you could do is take your text and put a tag, and this tag is going to be a break tag. And now if we refresh, notice now we have the text So now we can see that we have the text and the next line, but there is no space between the paragraphs. So the paragraphs basically will create an empty line. It will separate out your text very clearly, whereas in the break line will add a new line right underneath the text that you do have. Something else you probably noticed is that this break tag does not have a terminator like you have the paragraph or the body or the HTML. There are certain tags that do not follow this standard of having a terminator, and one of these is the break tag. So now that we got a very quick introduction to HTML, the best way to learn HTML or anything is to have a personal project and actually put it to work. And what we're going to do is create a personal website, something that you could use. In this way you can follow along and use the same features and techniques that we use and build yourself a personal website without any coding. It's just going to be plain HTML, and later on we can learn about how to put some dynamic stuff into it. And this personal site is going to be basically tell a little bit about you, who you are, and maybe a resume, some skills that you might have or hobbies, and also how people might be able to contact you. So with that said, let's get started and create our website. Now, before we do that, we need to gather some information and figure out what our site's going to look like. And in the next section, we'll talk about how to start a website and how to plan for it. So let's go ahead and create a folder. And in this folder, we're going to go ahead and add some HTML files. So we're going to start with the home page, and generally it's called index.html, but it can be pretty much anything. And then we'll create some more pages, and that'll be the about, the resume, and some other pages. And then we're going to move on to creating the content of our index page, and hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about HTML. So if you look there, we're using the file transport, and we are looking at our index HTML page, and as you can see, there's nothing really there except the HTML tag in the body. And if you notice that the tab has index.html. Now if you go to Google, it actually says Google instead of the actual page. Same thing with MSN. And how do these pages actually do it? Well, if we go look at the resource of the page, we can then look at see where this information is being set. And if we go to the head section, there is another tag called title, and that title has the actual name. If we change that to, let's say, Google 1, notice that the tab changes in there. If it doesn't have a title, by default, depending on your browser, it will have the name of the file. If we do the same thing with the msn.com page, and we'll go ahead and go look at the source, we'll go through the head section. They have a lot of metadata, and then if we go look at the title, and if you look at the title, it is exactly the same thing that we had before for Google. So if we search for the HTML head tag, it actually will tell us that it is a tag where we have metadata and it's not displayable on the page. So this is where we can put information so that the browser can use. In our case, is the title, but they can have other resources, and we'll see that later on. You can do the same exact search for the developer.mozilla group, and you'll have similar information. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for our page. We'll create the head, with our metadata, and we'll go ahead and create the title tag. And you can just pretty much put anything in the title. In our case, we'll just go ahead and put something like my personal website. You can change the my personal to a name or something other. Just make this more personal to your preference. So now if we refresh, we have our title. The other thing is that when we modify the information for the Google title, and if you refresh it, notice that it's gone away. That's because we were doing it locally in our computer. When your browser generally downloads an HTML file from a server, it will cache it. So let's go ahead and go back to our index.html page. And let's go ahead and put links to our other pages because we want people to be able to navigate to the other pages. So to do that, to create a link to our pages, we're going to go learn about a new HTML tag, which is the A tag. The A tag links to other resources, and then there's a attribute href, which will then actually point to the resource. In our scenario, it's going to be the name of the file that we are wanting to link to. And then we need to give it a between, once we close the tag, we can just put a quick description of what that link is. And if we refresh it, notice that now it's a link. If you click it, it'll like take you to that resource. And then we can navigate back and see our page. So you can always search for the href and read some information about how this tag is used. So let's go ahead and copy this link and reference all of our other pages. Now, there's a couple of things you could do. You could separate everything out by a pipe. And you can keep it on the same line, or you can have it on multiple lines. It doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and copy that and show you another way you could do this as well. Is you could put a break line instead of having the pipe delimiter there to separate things out. So this way the links will show below each other. So we leave that to your preference, which one you want to choose, whether you want to have them all on the same line or one below each other. We're going to go ahead and keep it below each other. So the next thing we can do is also create some more links. And these links will be something like your Instagram, your Facebook, your LinkedIn profile. So you could actually have additional links in here. Now, when you're creating a link, and if you don't have a URL for it, we'll go ahead and use the pound key. This way, it'll appear like a link, but when the user clicks on it, it doesn't go anywhere. This is temporary link that you can create, or later on when we learn, you can actually write JavaScript to control when a user clicks on the link to do something else with it. So, but for now, we'll keep a pound, but if you have Twitter account or Facebook, you could actually put the URL inside of the href attribute so that it can navigate to your Twitter page or your Facebook or LinkedIn. And it would be also great if we had actually a picture that we could put up there, our profile picture. And so we'll go ahead and learn about a new tag, and that is an image tag that we can reference. Similar to the href where you point to a page, except this time you'll be pointing to an image. And to do that, we will learn how to use the image tag, which is img, and it'll have a attribute of source, which is src, and the source will actually point to the name of the image that you want. You can also have an alternate description, which is alt attribute. So because we're not pointing to an image, it shows it as a broken image, but it has the alternate written out. But if you do have an image, then the alternate will not show up. So let's go ahead and create a new folder and add some images in here. We'll be using this for our page later on, so we'll just keep that there, and then let's add one more. So now that we got a quick review of the HTML, let's take a look at about how to design our website. So what we want to do is create our web page, and that's going to look something like this. We're going to have a image with our name, and then maybe some icons with some text about the links to different social media, and then we're going to have some icons and some description of the resume page, contact, and so forth. And then on this side we're going to have, depending on the links that we select over here, we're going to show some information. So if it was for a resume, we'll probably like break it out something like this, and each section would have a little bit of information about the experiences, like so. And then so basically this will be our page, and then again, depending on which link is selected here, we would actually change this to something different. So for this round, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and figure out this side of the HTML. We're going to learn about having an image, and then our name, and then I'll have some icons for the social media, and then we'll have all of the icons here with the different pages that we're going to have links to. So this is going to be our first priority, and then as the users click on these links, then this will be our second priority, where we're going to fill in this information on the right side, which means that this section that we numbered 1 will be duplicated on all of the contact pages. So as the user is navigated there, they can always choose these links to come back to the page. Okay, so now that we have a quick plan of what to do, let's go learn a little bit more about HTML and how we can actually produce this. So how do you lay out the page that we drew up? We can do that by learning a new HTML tag, which is the table. And basically we'll start off with a table tag, and then we're going to have some rows and columns. So we'll go ahead and have a table row. Inside of the table we can have a few columns. So for now, let's just have this to see what it's going to show. So we had one row, and then we had just single column. So we can just say column 1, and this is actually row 1 and column 1. So we could actually have a second column and still row 1, and this will be second column. Now if you wanted to put another row, we could then put another row down below. This is the second row, column 1, column 2. So in order to be able to take a look at this, let's go ahead and refresh our page and see what it looks like. So as you can see, we have some information here, but we can't really see the table. It's not visible for us, although if you go to look at the view source, you do see the table, and you definitely see the information that we had. And so to get this to be more visible, we can actually have some attributes to the table. So let's actually have a table border of 1, and let's go to our. So now you can see we can have a visual representation of the table by having a border around the columns and rows. So now we see something a little bit more visual. So what we can do is in this first column, in the first row, we can add all our information that we have here. Well, what we could do is probably put this information on the first row, first column, and then have this information added into the second one, and then keep this open for the detail on our page. And so to do that, let's go back to our HTML. Let's go ahead and actually take this information and copy this and go here to our first row, and let's go ahead and insert this in here. And then for our links, we're not going to need these breaks anymore, and take this and go to the second one. Okay, something similar to this, and now let's go ahead and refresh our page again. And it looks like we added this in the wrong column, so it really should be row 2 column 1, and we added it into the first row. So let's go ahead and take this out. It should be in this one, row 2 column 1. So let's go ahead and refresh our page again. So now we have something a little bit more in the way that things were looking before. But we also want to do is we want to have, instead of having for the links up above, instead of having these being just links with the text, let's have this as icons, and then have icons for this as well. So let's go ahead and open up a new tab, and we can actually go to a website called Box Icons, and in here you can see it's a lot of the different icons in here. And so let's look for example, for Twitter, and as you can see we have a Twitter icon, and if we click on it we get a lot of information about how to use this. The very first one is a Twitter as a PNG, and that's 24 pixels, and you can actually increase the size or lower it. You can also download it as an SVG, and then also the HTML, which will actually have the this information as a base64 encoding. So let's actually copy this and go to our page. So if this is going to be the Twitter icon, we can actually post this in here. So what we are seeing here is that we have an image tag, we have the source. The source is basically this information. This actually has some text that describes that this is the data is image, specifically PNG, and it is a base64, which means this information is base64. This information is actually binary of the binary image, but because binary image has non-printable text that we cannot have here, we got this been encoded to base64. We'll get into all of this later on, but just an example to show you what this would look like. Let's go ahead and save this and then go back to our page. So let's go back here and let's go ahead and refresh, and notice now that we have the icon and it is a clickable link, which of course doesn't go anywhere. Now we could actually do something else with this. We can download this as an SVG, so we can copy that and go to our HTML. So now instead of having this as the binary image itself, we can have an SVG, and SVG has a namespace and it has a width and height of the image, the view box, which is basically the height of the image, 24 by 24, and it has a style of what type of RGB coloring and alpha channel that we want to have this under, and then we have some other tag, and then has the path, and this actually being the SVG is a mathematical equation that shows us what the image will look like. So now if we refresh our image, it should be exactly the same thing, except that this will be now an SVG, and it's a little bit smaller because of the formatting that we selected. So if you wanted to make that a little bit higher, to 36 for example, we could have that and then copy that as well. Now if you go as the PNG, it's going to ask us to save this image, and we can actually save this. So now that's been saved. Let's go back to our, as you can see, we have the image in here, and what we can do is, now instead of this being SVG, we'll go back to the image tag, and then we'll have the source, and then the source is going to be images and our PNG file. And notice that this image tag also doesn't have a closing tag. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and refresh our page. And now we have a icon that's a little bit larger. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here and we're actually going to download the SVG, but we're going to download the 24 pixel. Let's copy that, and let's actually go to our HTML page, and we're just going to go ahead and paste that in there. So now our page looks pretty cool, but we have this little, so if we zoom in, notice we now have this underlaying thing in here. Let's go ahead and push this back to 0. Let's find out why we have that. So this brings us to something about HTML. Remember when we had, for example, here we have a space, we can put some text, and I can have some more spaces here and some more text, and let's save this and see what happens with the extra spaces that we have in here. So notice that we have a space here, and then we should be expecting more spaces between the CC and ASD SD, but we only get one space in here. Now the reason that happens is because no matter how much spaces you have, or even if you have multiple new lines in here, that's still going to be presented as a space, because it's going to ignore everything after it. It's just going to put one space in here. So that brings us to why we have these little underscores for the images, or the between these two links, and that is because we have the additional space. And because we have that space, it's underlying that. So to fix this, we need to make sure that we do not have a space in between our text. So let's go ahead and save that, and then let's take a look and see if we're going to see any spaces. And now the spaces are gone, and it's due to what we had. The other thing is, this image is a little bit more to the left, and maybe what we want to do is have this centered. And to do that, we can go in here and put a center tag on that image. And now if we refresh, so the image is a little bit more centered. We have our break line, then we have our images in there. So let's go ahead and do the same thing about on these links about me, resume, services, and contact. And we can make these images will be a little bit more prominent, so they'll be a little bit bigger. And let's see what we'd have as far as the icons. So first thing immediately looks like we didn't grab the correct services. So let's go back here for the server. It's 24. Let's see if that's the correct size. So it's not, should be really 48. So like if we change that to 48, let's see if that will work. It should, because it's an SVG. So keep those as is. There we go. So one thing we didn't go over was how does the browser know our font size and our font information, or how this stuff is being displayed. We didn't really specify, we just added the text and we were given this size and font. So if you right click on this and go to inspect to see the developer tools, you'll notice that we have our TD rows highlighted as selected, because that's the one that we are interested to get some information. And then if you come in here to the side, you'll see it says styles. And if you come down, you can see how this table is styled. And if we look at if you look at this TD tag, notice that it says user agent style sheet. Well, this by default, all browsers will have a style sheet. If you do not specify a font or the size or anything, your browser will automatically have this styling embedded in it that it will use to render the information on the page. So if you don't specify the font or the size, it will use the internal style sheet and that we have here, and it will display that information for you. So as you can see, we have our font variant, which is also being displayed. So if we go back and we decided that we want to style this ourselves, so if we come down here and say style, so notice now that the size is grown a little bit. We can also change, for example, the font name or font family. If we choose New Courier, and let's go ahead and refresh. And notice now that it has changed the font style and the size of our font. So you can go and add information in the style section of the HTML tag to tell it what type of font to use and what type of size it needs to have. So if you had this as a paragraph down here below, you can also add styling as well as color and other information. So any tag within this HTML can have a styling to enhance the text that you have. For our purposes, this should be good enough. So we'll just keep that as is. And let's go ahead and take the border and make it to 0. because we don't want to see that information when displaying everything. So it looks kind of like this. Let's go ahead and do style our table to say background color, and let's choose, for example, not black, but maybe a dark style gray or dark slate gray. But then our links looks incredibly unusual. So perhaps what we can do, so now we set a background. Let's go ahead and, now that we set a background, let's go ahead and set a perhaps a white smoke. Okay, so now you can see that we have a link that is white. So we can copy this. So now if you wanted to change the color of the SVG, we could come in here and perhaps choose something like this, right? And click save. So there we go. So we could go in here and change all of this and change the background if you wanted to. For now, let's go back and set everything to default, because we'll come back and do the styling later once we figure out exactly what we want on our page. So we went ahead and updated all of the pages and also added an additional table where the links were going, and so that we could control the formatting even more with HTML and also get a little bit more comfortable with the tables. So what the page looks like now, it looks something like this. We had mentioned that we're going to go ahead and remove all the formatting because we're going to do that later. So this is what it looks like, and the home page now here has a link so that it can always take us back to the index. So if you go to the different pages, as you can see, we're navigating and then come to the home page, but we don't really know which page we are except if you look at the title to where you are. And what we need to do is to start adding some text on these pages and see what the formatting would look like for our personal website. So here we had mentioned we added a table, so let's go ahead and actually put a border around this so you can see what the table would look like. So that's basically what our table is looking like. And let's go back and change this back to 0. And if we go into any of these pages, we added the same exact information. In here you should pretty much kind of recognize a pattern or an issue that we're seeing. Pretty much everywhere where we need to make a change, let's say we go to our index and we're adding, let's say, another row in here, and we'll just call this like contact 2. We'll keep this to the same contact just so you can see. And then what will happen is that if we go back to our page and let's refresh this, so we get a contact 2, but notice now this page doesn't have it. These other pages, they do not have this information. Even the contact 2, which goes back to this contact page, does not have it. So the pattern here, or the issue that we're noticing, that every time we make a change, we have to then copy this and go back to different pages. And we can resolve this issue once we understand a little bit more about how to do some dynamic stuff, either with JavaScript, or once we actually get into doing .NET development and using MVC framework or some other aspect of the Razor pages and stuff that we're going to go into later on. But for now, we should be pretty comfortable with some of the HTML. So now we can do is we didn't really go over what HTML really is. We just gave you some elements and what they do, but didn't really explain what the anatomy was, or if you had a tag, how do you know if the tag needs to have an ending tag? We have seen some tags that did not have the ending tag. For example, the image tag, the break tag, for example, they don't have an ending tag. How do you know when you encounter these HTML elements if they have one or not? You can quickly do a search online to see on Mozilla's website and developer network, or W3 schools, or other websites to kind of see if the tag that you're working with has a ending tag or not. The other thing is that there is a specific anatomy to a tag. So far we've seen a tag starts and ends with greater and less than sign, and then the tag has a name, and they can have one or more attributes. And these attributes are basically key pair values. So this is the key and this is the value for it. And then the ending tag for this is exactly the same thing, except it has the / to indicate that is a ending tag for our table. Same thing with the TR. We didn't put any attribute in here, so you could actually come in here if you wanted to add additional. So you could do in style, and then you can put a border color if we had something. So if we go to 1, you could actually put some kind of information in there. So let's go ahead and remove this. So you can have additional attributes. As you can see, the image tag has multiple attributes. It has a source attribute, and alternate, and height and width attribute. And we could do much more nicer formatting to make our page pop up and look a little bit more pleasing to the eye. But if you notice that every time we come in here and let's say we put a style information, we would then have to copy the same thing and go to the other pages and add those in there. So what we'll do is we'll go through all of these pages and add some default information in this tag in here. So let's actually go to our index page. Let's just put an X in here so we can see what this would look like. So here is our table. Actually, let's go ahead and make this border 1. And then so we can see, so here then we could add a text or an image of some kind here to make this much more pleasing. And as you go into the different pages, we can put some text in there as well. But we're only going to concentrate on formatting maybe just the home page to make it much more nicer. But it wouldn't make any sense to go and format every single one and then copy everything over. Once we learn CSS, you can, which will be our next series, it's going to be much more easier to take the styling for this home page and then apply it here without having to duplicate all of the effort that we did. So let's go ahead and let's see how we can put some styling, maybe put a nice little image here and what this index page is going to look like before continuing on to the next section. Okay, so we are at the developer mozilla.org, and let's actually quickly search for the image tag, and let's go here and scroll down to, so basically these are all of the different images that it supports. And if we continue going down, there's a section where it will, these are some of the examples of using the tag, and of course you have some do's and don'ts that you can follow. But in the technical summary, if you come in here and you see these tag omission, basically it's telling us that it must have a start tag and must not have an end tag. So we know that our HTML tag does not have to have a end tag. So if we go for example, let's look for table. So now we have a table tag. If we go in here, tag omission, both the starting and ending tag are mandatory. So now you can always come in here, look at the tag omission to see if the tag requires an ending tag or not. So this is how you can tell when you have to put a tag, ending tag or not. And you can also come in here, look at some formatting issues and how to work with this. One thing you can do is, so we actually have turned on the border on our web page because we wanted to kind of see how we could do the formatting as we mentioned on the index page. What we want to do is we want to put an image in here, but it's going to look kind of weird because we want the image to also be part of this column and then as well as this column here. And what we want to do is we want to merge these columns in the table. So therefore, this whole left side will be totally separate, but these two will be the same. And you can do this by an attribute. So if we come in here, this is going to be the first column. And then this is going to be the second column. And this is the column that we want to have our background on it. So what we're going to first do is remove this column, and if we save that and then we go into our page, it's going to look a little off. Now the formatting, because we've set up the formatting to show the border, and now you're not seeing that column and things kind of look a little bit weird. So what we need to do is expand this column. And so if we go back here, there's going to be an attribute here. So you can do a couple of things. You can do a row span, or you can do a column span. So what are the differences between this versus the row span? So the column, so actually let's put a row span first, and let's take this column span out and see what that's going to look like. So if we go back to our page and refresh that, and now notice that with the row span, it actually expanded exactly what we were looking for. So the row span deals with the actual row, which is the rows going up and down. And then if we do column span, then it's going to go horizontally basically. So the row span goes vertically and the column span goes vertically. So if you want to merge cells, you'll have to use row span in here. So let's kind of quickly go over what this page really should look like, and then that way we know what to target. So we've already gone and formatted the page, and basically this is the formatted page. We want to be able to put the image background in here where we have the X, and then we want to have some kind of a text in here about maybe your name and what you do, and then on the left side we want to have some links to your contact, resume, and everything else. We've already gone over and made all of this white. We put a little bit of text in here too, and you could put an image here. We'll go ahead and reformat this a little bit more. So this is what it looks like now, and this is what we're targeting. I think this looks a little bit better. Looks like this is a page that came from late 1990s, 2000, when the web was just being born. So we want to kind of make sure that you have a page where it's a little bit more professional and more presentable. Of course, all of these fonts, we've actually used a font in here which is different, and therefore it looks a little bit more sharper and cleaner. We'll go ahead and do the same thing. Once we get there, we did the same thing for the maximum code here as well. So let's go ahead and see how we can transform our page from this to something a little bit more professional to this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our table height and width to be 100%. So if we go look at our page, the table is only expanding based on what's inside of the columns and rows. So if you notice, this is our X, the starting in the back, and what it's ending is exactly here. What we want to do is we want to make this to be 100%. So the table takes the whole width of the browser as far as the height and the width goes. So let's come over here to the attribute for the table, and let's add a width of 100%, and let's put a height of 100% as well. And let's go ahead and save this, and let's go to our page, refresh it, and if you notice now it's 100%. And we'll fix this where the text is getting a little bit chewed up, where this column is taking too much space. We will go ahead and fix that. The next thing we want to do is we want to add our image where this X is, so that we can have our background. So this is the image that we've had earlier on that we saved. So basically you want to take that image and make that to be a background of our column in here. So we're going to use the style attribute, and we're going to use background image, and we're going to pass it the URL. And because we already had double quotes in here, we're going to use single quotes inside of the style, and we're going to say images, and this is going to be the hiker. So let's just go ahead and copy the name of this image, and then come back here and paste it and save that. So let's go ahead in here and refresh our page, and let's see why the image is not showing. So let's actually turn on our developer tools and take a look at the network section, and then refresh our page and see what is happening. So as you can notice that it is not finding the image URL. And so let's go ahead and see what we made a mistake on. So this is images rather than image, so that's probably the first mistake we did. And then let's go ahead and refresh the page, and we should see our image, except the image is a little bit skewed. It's fixed to the right side, so we need to have a width, and what we're going to do is we're going to have it so that it takes about 90% of the page, I think, or 80%. So let's just go ahead and add a width in here. Let's just do 90%, and let's refresh this. And okay, so that's actually pushed our image, but it's still not showing because it's going off screen. It's actually showing at 100% what it's supposed to be. So the width is set, but the height is it's the whole image. So maybe we should go and set that. So if we come over here and set the height to 100%. So no change, and what we can do, something else we can do is set the background size. So we can say background size, and we have some options, and let's go ahead and use cover. And let's actually quickly take a look. So now we're seeing that it is fitting pretty well, but we have a lot of text or empty spaces between here and here, and so we'll take care of that. But the next thing we should do is put the font in here that says who you are, your name, and then what your profession is. For us, we're just going to put maximum code. I'm a developer, and let's take a look at what that's going to look like. So where the X is going, so if we go back to notice our X is in here, and the font is not very clear, and we'll fix that. So let's just go here, and we're going to use a new HTML tag, and that's going to be an H1 tag. H1 is a header, a heading. This is the highest heading you can get. So there's H1, H2, H3. So actually, if we go in here, so there's H1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. There's 6 headings in there. We're just going to use that first one. So let's actually put here maximum code, and let's do maybe, maybe do a break, and I am a developer, and maybe something like that, right? So I guess let's take a look and see what this looks like now. So it doesn't look very professional. Let's go and see what we can do to clean this up a little bit. So let's go back here, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to add a style in here, and what we're going to say is font family, because we want a font name. And let's just use Open Sans for the font. And then for the color, let's just use white. And let's actually go back to our page. So now it looks pretty good, but it is really set to the left. What we need to do is make this thing move a little bit more towards the center or over here. And how you would do that is if we go to the developer tools, and we look at the source, and we look at the styling of this. So notice that it has a box around here, and you have a margin, you have a border, you have padding, and then finally you actually have the text where it goes in. And as you come in and add, as your cursor goes in here, you can see that you're getting some information about what's supposed to go in here. So if we come in here and let's say put 300 pixels, notice now it moved it over here more to the center. So let's go ahead and close this. So that kind of looks a little bit right. So what we need to do is put a styling margin to push the text over to place where we want it. So go over here, and we're going to choose a margin, and we said it's going to be about 300 pixels. Okay. And now let's go ahead over here and refresh this. And okay, so that looks a little bit better and cleaner. The next thing maybe we should do is take out the borders of the table and then set a coloring for the background. So let's go here and change this to 0, and also change this to 0. And the next thing we should do is figure out what the background is going to be. So for the background, we want to do the whole page. So we're going to go to the body, and we're going to set a style for this. And we're going to say background color to something maybe black, or maybe an RGB, let's say 1122 3A. And you can always come in here and change this to something different. but let's see what this is going to look like for us on our page. So if we come over here, so this looks good, but we need to go here and change all of our SVGs so they'll be more white. And that's one of the reasons we chose SVG, because it's a lot easier to change the color of the SVG versus having to, every time you want to change something, you have to come in here and modify the image, the PNG, change the colors, and then save it, and then refresh and see it. It's a lot easier to do it in SVG. So let's go ahead and make this so we already have our information saved up. So if you do 255 for R, G, and B, that should make it white. So let's go ahead and save this. And then if we go back to our page and refresh it, so everything is white. But we also want to make the links white as well. And we also want to remove the underline and then move the link to be the center of this. So there's a couple of things you could do. One, we need to fix the positioning. So what we could do is actually take this table and move it over here underneath our links, and then refresh, and so now we had something more close resembling to what we had before. So the next thing we should do is move this up a little bit. So if we come in here to this TD tag, let's put a style, and or let's change this to the vertical alignment to be top, and let's go ahead and refresh this. So that looks a little bit better, and let's actually put our text in there as well. So the text would go, so this is our index page, href, and it's going to be part of the link itself. So what we can do is put maybe a break, 2 breaks, and then another break, and in here we can put maximum code. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh this now. So now we need to change the styling on this and pretty much all of these other links as well. So that'll be our next step. Let's go back here. So what we need to do is come in here to the link and put some styling. And what we want to do is, for this one, we want to set the font family, and we said we wanted this to be Open Sans. This is the same text, and we can do font size to be maybe large, and then we're gonna do text decoration, and this is to remove the link underneath to be none, and so that way it just looks like a normal, and we want the color to be white. So let's actually save this and put it to all of our link. So we don't need to put it in here, but we probably need to put it for the rest of these. So actually let's reformat these guys a little bit. And so for this, and for this, okay, save that, and let's go ahead and refresh this. So that looks a little bit better, except we lost the images. That's because we forgot to put a quote. So let's fix that really quick. Let's try that and see if this works. Okay, so we now have everything the way we want. But the other thing we want to do is we want to put some space between the social network icons and our links, so we can push this down. So remember, we said we could use the margin, but also the icons we have here right now is a table. We can actually use something a little bit different. So let's actually go over a new HTML tag that we can use. So if we were to go here and grab all of the links and bring them here, and we're gonna go ahead and use what's called a bullet list. So then we can take this out, take this whole thing out so that there will only be one. And the way to use the bullet list, it's going to be starting with a UL tag, and then underneath this will be the IL tag. So everything will go inside of this. Let's go ahead and save that. Now let's take a look and see what our page is going to look like. So that kind of pushed it up and messed up some of our formatting, but we can fix it really quick. So in the interest of time, we went ahead and did the update, and we're going to go ahead and go over this now. So we set a styling for the UL that will apply to the entire section here. And then we went and added a style. For this one, we just did about me, but we can copy this as well and paste it to all of our other links. So let's take a look at what that looks like now. So if we refresh our page, notice now that everything is white and our about me is white and it's in the center. And what we need to do is do the same thing for the rest of the links. So before copying everything, let's just do a top 80 to separate out the associated links from the rest of the links. Let's go ahead and refresh that. That looks good. Now let's go ahead and copy all the styling and apply it to the rest of the links. So now our links look a little bit better. We could put a little bit borders and margins and so forth around these, so they'll be spaced out. We should actually change the font so that this will be the same font. Let's go change that as well. So let's actually put this on the UL. So it'll be font family will be Open Sans. So there we go. So this is the page that we're going to have pretty much on all the other links as well. But if you noticed, as we mentioned before, there's going to be a lot of copying that needs to happen between the styles. So what we're going to do is introduce cascading style sheets to make things a little bit easier. So HTML is the blueprint, if you will, and then the browser builds the building for us. And then the styling sheet that we keep referring to is basically painting and aesthetics that you can do to a building to make it visually more appealing. And basically that's how HTML works. And then if you wanted to manipulate objects within the browser, once it's been rendered, you would use JavaScript that you could apply some dynamic stuff that can happen on the client side, where if you click on a button, you can change colors and do different things. So the role of HTML really is that it contains all the formatting that it needs to render the HTML.
and if you have styling, it'll apply it. If not, it'll use the browser's internal style sheet to add fonts and coloring and size the letters in the way whatever is specified in the internal browser's CSS. And then again, the styling is to decorate the HTML so it becomes more visually appealing, and then the JavaScript to manipulate the browser once it's been rendered. So that's it for this round. We hope to see you in the next one. And in the next one, we'll talk about cascading style sheet and learn a little bit more about additional HTML tags and start making our website a little bit more presentable. And hopefully at the end of that, you can take this template that we're going to be building as a resume or individual website for you to do as you please. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.